Hello everyone, welcome to another video. This is a 1 year or so review of the Tamron 28-75 for Sony E-mount cameras. But before we get started, I couldn't help it but shoot some B-roll. So I hope you've enjoyed that B-roll sequence. Recently, I find myself enjoying a lot more doing product B-roll and just B-roll in general and trying to find different ways of shooting it. So I've been using the Tamron 28-75 a little bit over a year now. So this lens has been out for about 2 years from the date of the recording of this video. And I have to say, when it was first announced, I tried to get my hands on it as soon as possible, but it was back ordered because it was just so popular. The other alternative that we had at that moment for Sony full-frame E-mount cameras was the Sony G Master lens, the 24-70 F2.8, which is really expensive. To be honest, when I first switched to Sony full-frame mirrorless cameras, one of the things that was keeping me from switching was the high cost of Sony lenses. Thankfully, Tamron came up with a really good solution, really good price for a f2.8 wide to telephoto zoom lens. As someone who shoots events and weddings, I've always been a fan of zoom lenses. So I was really excited when Tamron came up with this. In this video, I'll be showing video footage and photos that I've taken using this lens. And this lens is the reason why I never got a G Master 24-70 f2.8. Having said that, this is not a video comparison between the 24-70 G Master Sony lens and this lens, but rather I give you my thoughts having used this lens for over a year now and the things that I like about it. So this is a wide to telephoto lens that goes from 28 to 75. Aperture goes from f2.8 all the way to f22. And a really good thing about it is that it has constant aperture no matter at what focal length you are in. So first, let's talk about build quality. So it looks really nice with the matte black color. The lens feels quite plasticky, so I feel like if you were to drop it, it'll be game over. And I have a feeling that they probably cheaped out on the overall frame and build construction of this lens to reduce the cost. It is a lot lighter than the G Master equivalent. It's about 1 and 2 pounds in weight, which is a whole pound lighter than the G Master lens. The zoom, sometimes I feel that although it's okay, it could be a lot smoother, but it's definitely not a deal breaker for me. The focus by wire of this lens, I feel like it's quite smooth and intuitive, and it has enough resistance. Unlike other Sony lenses, the zoom ring and the focus ring have been flipped. Honestly, it doesn't affect me a lot. It's just a matter of getting used to it, but not a deal breaker again. One reason why this lens is a lot smaller and lighter is because it doesn't go all the way to the 24mm focal length. So it starts at 28, which is an awkward number to start at, but maybe that's what they did to reduce the size and weight of this lens. So I've shot a few times with this out in the rain. With light rain, I think it's okay, but once it starts raining a lot, or if it's snowing a lot, I wouldn't trust myself with it. I would get a cover for it, or I'll get an umbrella to cover myself. And this being a zoom lens, the lens barrel extends out, but it doesn't extend out way too much. So for me, when I'm using it on a gimbal, because the lens barrel doesn't extend too much, it actually still works well on the gimbal if I shoot, say, at the 50mm focal length, or in rare instances at the 75mm focal length. Because the lens barrel doesn't extend out too much, my gimbal is able to handle it without the entire setup being too front heavy. The minimum focusing distance of this lens is actually really close at 7.48 inches, which makes it almost a macro lens. Another thing about this lens is that it's not stabilized, but if you're using it on your Sony full frame camera like the A7 III, A7R, most of these bodies come with IBIS. in-body image stabilization, so I wouldn't worry too much about this lens not being stabilized. So autofocus performance, many people have said that this is not as good as the G Master lens. I have yet to test that, but I find that for most purposes it works really well. It's actually quite fast in grabbing focus. It works well with all modes of autofocus, but I do find that in certain rare occasions, it tends to hunt quite a little bit for focus. So when you have face detection engaged on your A7 III, like me for example, autofocus is quite good. Autofocus for video works quite well. It does a really good job at tracking your person. Face detection in video mode as well is quite good. I find that this lens is really quick at capturing and grabbing that focus. This lens has variable focusing distance, meaning that at the widest focal length of 28mm, it grabs focus at about 7.48 inches, and at the long end of the lens at 75mm, it grabs focus at about 15.3 give or take inches. So next thing we'll talk about sharpness. I did a few tests specifically for this video at different f-stops and at different focal lengths just to compare it and try to see if there's any difference. So at 28mm at F2.8, it's quite sharp in the center, but it starts to get soft around the edges. This doesn't happen as much at F4 or F9 or F11. As you can see right at F9, it sharpens in the corners. At the 50mm focal length, this lens was quite sharp in the center, but not so much around the edges. And at 75mm, the lens was sharper all around, and the corners were better starting at F4. Next thing I want to talk about is distortion. Because this lens does not go too wide, at 28mm the distortion is not apparent at all. Distortion is very minimal along with vignetting. So after watching some sample footage, you can see that this lens can produce really good photos and really good videos. The image quality that comes out of this is really good actually for the price. So after more than a year of shooting with this lens, did I make the right choice? I think I did. First of all, I saved a lot of money compared to what I would have spent if I purchased the Sony G Master 24-70. It's also a lot lighter than the G Master lens, and because the lens barrel doesn't extend out too much when you zoom in, it's a lot easier to balance on the gimbal. And also a lot easier on your body as well, because when you're shooting a 12 or 13 hour wedding, every single pound counts. I'm quite satisfied with the sharpness of this lens, whether for photos or videos. I'm sure the G Master lens is a lot more sharp, but I mean, to the naked eye, it's almost unnoticeable, unless you're pixel peeping, which 90% of the general population doesn't do. The only two things that I wish this lens had was a manual switch to switch it between autofocus and manual focus, and that it was stabilized. But again, if you added those two features, the price of this lens would increase. So if you're looking for a cheaper alternative to the G Master lens for a Sony mirrorless full frame camera, this would be a very good option for you. So thanks for watching, guys. Let me know in the comments below what your favorite zoom lens is for Sony full frame mirrorless cameras. If you like this video, please don't forget to subscribe. Your support will be greatly appreciated. And if you have already subscribed, thank you so much for watching. And that is all for today, guys, and until next time.